Tensions in East Asia are mounting as relations between Japan and China take a sharper turn. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's recent remarks regarding Taiwan have triggered a strong reaction from Beijing. And in Beijing, the message is equally clear. The relationship is at risk of deterioration. Japan's government had been looking ahead to a trilateral meeting of culture ministers scheduled for 24th November in Macau, involving Japan, China and South Korea. But China this week officially communicated that the conditions were not yet ready for the meeting and the gathering was postponed. Beijing cited Tokyo's recent comments as undermining the foundation for cooperation, framing them as an affront to China's core interests and an obstacle to diplomacy. From Japan's vantage point, the cancellation comes amid a rapid escalation of what had been cautious post-Cold War engagement with its larger neighbour. The spark for the current flare-up was Prime Minister Takaichi's statement in the Japanese parliament. In effect, she suggested that a Chinese attack on Taiwan might constitute a survival-threatening situation for Japan, implying that Tokyo could respond militarily in defence of the self-governing island. That remark broke with Tokyo's prior policy of strategic ambiguity, and Beijing reacted swiftly. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman declared the remarks to be extremely erroneous, accusing Japan of interfering in China's internal affairs and demanding that Tokyo retract them. While Tokyo insists its comments were a legitimate assessment of security risk, the fallout has been immediate. Chinese state media and social media accounts unleashed personal attacks. One video posted by the Chinese military depicted the Japanese Prime Minister holding a bomb and sinking alongside a ship. Another showed her setting fire to a book labelled Japan's Peace Constitution. In some posts, she was portrayed as recklessly playing with fire, a metaphor not lost on observers. Beijing, in turn, warned of consequences and summoned the Japanese ambassador for a diplomatic dressing down, signalling that the bilateral relationship is now entering a more adversarial phase. The Japanese side, while publicly emphasising that the export-import issues are technical, finds itself caught in a broader strategy of economic and diplomatic coercion. On the 19th of November, China suddenly announced it would effectively halt imports of Japanese seafood products. Shipments of scallops from Hokkaido, just resumed, were stopped before clearing customs. Japanese officials described the refusal as a procedural matter, but foreign diplomats and analysts saw a clear pattern of economic leverage tied to diplomatic friction. At a Tokyo press event, US Ambassador to Japan George Glass, meeting following a discussion between Japan's foreign minister and Tokyo's officials, described Beijing's behaviour in stark terms. China's provocative statements and coercive economic response undermine regional stability. He said the US views the effective import suspension as typical economic coercion and affirmed American support for Japan's position. Meanwhile, street-level evidence of the diplomatic chill is visible in China. At a Japanese restaurant opening in a major Chinese city, fish tanks stood empty. Reservations for Japanese food, events and visits are being cancelled, and Japanese businesses are bracing for reputational fallout. The ripple effects are now extending beyond Tokyo and Beijing into cultural, academic and commercial realms across the region. In the region's diplomatic calendar, the timing could not be worse. The upcoming G20 Leaders Summit begins on the 22nd of November. And China has indicated it will not engage even in brief talks or informal greetings with the Japanese side. Diplomats regard this as a clear signal of Beijing's hardline posture, choosing limited engagement over full diplomatic freeze, but nevertheless raising the prospect of broader isolation of Tokyo in diplomatic fora. The decision to postpone the Macau culture ministers' meeting is more than symbolic. It underscores a deeper breakdown in the people-to-people and institutional ties that often soften geopolitical friction. Japan's chief cabinet secretary described China's explanation as conflicting, with the formal aim of strengthening trilateral cooperation with South Korea and Japan. For Tokyo, the message from Beijing is blunt. Alignment on principles of sovereignty and Taiwan will determine the health of wider cooperation. From Tokyo's perspective, the calculus is complex. On one hand, Prime Minister Takaichi apparently concluded that Japan's interests and alliance commitments may require a clearer stance on Taiwan. On the other hand, the rapid escalation of tensions with its largest neighbour adds strategic risk at a delicate moment, given Japan's reliance on Chinese trade and the overlapping footprints in East Asia's regional architecture. Beijing, for its part, appears to be using the moment to reshape the diplomatic terrain. By publicly equating Japan's remarks with interference and portraying Tokyo as destabilizing, China is signaling a new threshold for red lines, particularly around the Taiwan issue. The use of nationalist social media attacks and economic countermeasures suggests that Beijing is prepared for both reputational and material pushback, not just conventional diplomacy. In Taipei, President Ching-Te has also entered the fray. The Taiwanese leader posted a photo of himself enjoying Japanese seafood, miso soup, Kagoshima amberjack sushi, and Hokkaido scallop sushi, underscoring Tokyo-Taipei solidarity in the face of Beijing's pressure. That act, while symbolic and benign from a Japanese-Taiwanese cultural perspective, angered Beijing, which regards Taiwan's engagements with other democracies as provocative. Taiwan has also stepped up its defense posture. The government has committed to accelerate development of an indigenous air defense system dubbed T-Dome and to raise defense spending to as much as 5% of gross domestic product by 2030. That marks a clear shift in Taiwan's posture amid heightened Chinese military pressure. Observers say the triangular dynamic, Tokyo, Beijing, Taipei, is now operating on higher alert. Japan's firm articulation of a possible military role in Taiwan's defense has unsettled Beijing, and Taiwan's embrace of Japanese cultural ties has further provoked Chinese sensitivities. The role of the US as Tokyo's security ally looms large. Washington has signaled backing for Japan and has flagged any Chinese economic coercion as unacceptable in broader Indo-Pacific strategy. While Japan insists that the halt in seafood imports is a technical issue tied to certification and safety documents, many analysts say the line between sanitary controls and economic diplomacy is blurred. Past patterns in China have shown that import bans following diplomatic friction are rarely purely administrative. The cancellations of Japanese cultural and commercial engagements in China and the formal breakdown in trilateral ministerial cooperation with China and South Korea may signal a shift in Beijing's approach. Rather than taking isolated missteps, China appears to be reframing Japan as aligned with other democracies in a contest over Taiwan and regional order, thus making Tokyo a more direct target of coercive diplomacy. Japan's domestic politics amplify the stakes. Prime Minister Takaichi leads a minority government after her historic appointment as Japan's first female prime minister. Her security-first orientation and willingness to discuss defense scenarios linked to Taiwan mark a departure from previous cautious Japanese governments. That strategy has both supporters and critics. Some see it as appropriate given regional threats, others warn it risks unnecessary provocation and escalation. For China, the message to Tokyo appears twofold: publicly criticize and isolate Japan diplomatically and apply economic complements such as import bans and sanctions. The postponement of cultural links is part of this broader playbook. This represents a shift from earlier Chinese policy, which mixed engagement and competition, toward a more confrontational posture when it perceives its red lines to be crossed. What remains uncertain is whether either side currently seeks de-escalation. Beijing has not offered a concrete roadmap back to dialogue. Tokyo has called for calm and emphasized the procedural nature of the import halt, but has also reaffirmed its defense commitments and alliance ties. The risk is that what began as rhetorical escalation could evolve into miscalculation, particularly around Taiwan, where even a small incident could rapidly expand. In the days ahead, Japan will likely seek to reassure partners and markets, emphasizing continuity of trade and diplomacy. China will continue to calibrate its actions. Indeed, the empty fish tanks in a Japanese restaurant in China may be a cultural sign of pressure, but the suspension of seafood imports hits deeper, affecting supply chains, regional trade flows, and reciprocal trust. Taiwan's presence complicates the environment further. Taipei's defense investments, Japan's public statements, and China's diplomatic and economic retaliation together create a triangular tension that could define East Asia's geopolitical contours. The upcoming G20 summit will be a moment of possible confrontation, or at least of cooling silence. Japan may attempt to use the forum to reset or diffuse tensions, but with China signaling refusal even of informal encounters, the scene is set for an uneasy summit. Analysts will watch whether other regional players, South Korea, Australia, Southeast Asian states, make statements of support, push for mediation, or quietly brace for fallout. Ultimately, the escalation is about more than Japan-China bilateral friction. It touches on the evolving security architecture of the Indo-Pacific, the role of alliances, and the degree to which economic interdependence can cushion or fail strategic fault lines. Japan's shift toward more explicit security commitments, China's willingness to wield economic coercion and cultural diplomacy, Taiwan's embracement of Japanese-Taiwanese ties and defense investment, all of these signal that East Asia's status quo is under pressure. How the big players respond in the coming weeks may set the direction of region-wide fault lines for years to come.